Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivanu ladlik ner shel Chanukah. For nearly 2,000 years, Jews around the world have been reciting that blessing, celebrating the Festival of Lights. And today, in Bondi, Australia, those lights are the lights of police cars and ambulances. Because again, in the West, we have Jews being murdered for being Jews. And again, the Intifada has been globalised. And you know exactly why this has happened, how it's been allowed to happen. You know why two men could calmly load their guns and aim them at children eating donuts and then reload their guns and do the same again and again for 20 minutes. You know where the hatred and justification has come from, the hatred of Jews and the justification to try and kill as many of us as possible. You know about an ideology that is used by many of its followers to teach Jews are evil. You know about imported Middle Eastern cultures that do the same, that consider Jews less than human. You know about a media who spreads lies about Jews, joined by NGOs and universities and far-left bigots and useful idiots and clueless celebrities, about anti-Zionists who are really just anti-Semites who want to pretend they're not racist. You know about institutions meant to protect our rights doing the opposite, and a political class that buries its head in the sand when it's not rewarding terrorism to appease marginal voters. You know all of this, which is why Australian Jews knew today was coming. Just as a few months ago, British Jews knew 2 Jews would be murdered. And why it's likely to happen again until actual action is taken. But what action? Well, why don't we start with the Charity Commission doing its job? As the pictures, names and stories of the victims slowly emerge, giving the abstract a terrible reality, so our grieving can truly begin, there are 2 names in particular I want to talk about. Ahmed Al-Ahmed and Naveed Akram. Both men, seemingly Muslims, both living in Sydney, and yet one is a hero, a man who risked his own life even after being shot repeatedly to disarm and prevent the evil of the other. One man was inspired to become the best of humanity, the other, the worst. Because I am willing to bet that the mosque Ahmed Al-Ahmed is a member of isn't broadcasting hate against Jews. And there are hours of footage proudly put out by mosques based in the UK preaching Jew hate. And when reported to the Charity Commission, apart from a few slaps on the wrist, nothing has happened. So please, save your empty platitudes, politicians. You want to do something? Why don't you start by removing the charity status of those mosques? I'm not saying to shut them, but if they want to preach hate, if any religion wants to preach hate, there is no need for it to be enabled by the state, to be rewarded by the state. And if there are followers of Islam who subsequently threaten or enact violence, then get the police to enforce the laws of the land and show that whilst we are tolerant in the West, the price is tolerance for all. I am now joined by the Executive Manager at the AIJAC, Joel Burney. Joel, hello. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what your community, the Jewish community in Australia, is going through. What is the sense of your friends and family in Australia?
Listening to your opening monologue, all of the themes and disappointment of the UK Jewish community that you experienced in light of the Manchester attack. I remember the community there being so angry and so, suggesting to the UK authorities that the community there had been warning that blood being spilled was just a matter of time. And the parallels are exactly the same as what's going on in Australia. Your viewers need to understand that only 48 hours after the massacre on the 7th of October 2023, the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, Sydney descended into chaos with a violent, thuggish riot chanting anti-Jewish slogans on the steps of the Opera House. The world was shocked to see that footage. Now, it wasn't just a shock to the international community of seeing such a beautiful city being overrun by violent thugs so soon after such a vicious and violent massacre in Israel. The problem was that the police were there, and the police stood by, and the police watched. And then ever since that day, on the 9th of October 2023, the Australian Jewish community has been entirely under siege through escalating violence of verbal attacks, car bombings, fire bombings at houses, graffiti at schools, firebombing and burning down synagogues, attacks on Jewish businesses. You name it, we've experienced it in an escalating pitch, targeting a very small Jewish community of around 100,000 people. So when I wake up this morning and I wake up to an inflated death toll, I believe unconfirmed reports now up to 16 deceased, this, unfortunately, the one emotion that I am not is surprised. We have been warning about this occurring for the past 2 years. We have been warning that inaction against anti-Jewish rhetoric was going to be a problem. We were warning that the pro-Palestinian marches in the streets of Melbourne and Sydney, completely unabated to say whatever they wanted, to spew whatever trash they wanted, to call out kids, Jewish kids, and saying that all Zionists are terrorists and Kaiba al-Yahud and from the river to the sea. Authorities, what did you think was going to happen? The violence was already on the streets 48 hours after the event. And then 2 years later, we have all of these innocent people who have been gunned down just for being Jewish. This is a sad and tragic day for my Jewish community in Australia, but this is a very, very dark day for the Australian nation.
Is there a sense of, as you say, there was anger in the UK, but there was also this feeling like Jews in the UK have been ignored precisely because, frankly, we obey the law and we follow the rules. And so that allows the authorities and the police to essentially ignore us. Is that the same in Australia?
It's not just about that. It's also about sheer numbers. So, we are a small community. The Muslim community in Australia is not. There's around 10 times the amount of Muslim Australians than Jewish Australians. So in terms of government, and these type of questions, as a community leader, I would have been careful in choosing my words. I would have been diplomatic in my approaches with government that I have to deal with on a regular basis. But now I just don't feel the need to be so diplomatic about it. The federal government made a conscious decision that it was going to guard itself from political hits from a very larger and more spread out electoral constituency than the Jewish community, which, as you know, likes to congregate in nice, close quarters together. So we don't have a huge amount of political power in this country, considering that we're only located in a few seats. So it was very clear in the last federal election of this year that the federal government, the Labor government, was very concerned about maintaining its very high Muslim vote. And it appears as though that its policies, its rhetoric, and its actual behaviour and practices fitting into that theme have unfortunately done a great disservice to the Jewish community. Government institutions like the Human Rights Commission refuse to investigate anti-Semitism by itself in isolation, as it's not a big enough problem. And nearly every single time that a government official or a government minister or a government MP has discussed the issues of anti-Semitism, the next words that come out of their mouth is "and Islamophobia." For 2 years, the Australian Jewish community was gaslit by this federal government and with the conflation of anti-Semitism with Islamophobia. The two toxins are not the same. The two toxins are not the same when it comes to volume of attacks or the veracity of attacks, or unfortunately, the perpetrators of the attacks, with many Muslims being arrested and convicted on anti-Semitism charges throughout the past 2 years. So the Australian Jewish community has been targeted by many people, including members of the Australian Muslim community. But the government seems to think that it's okay to conflate anti-Semitism with Islamophobia. So this is a rude wake-up call and shock for Australia. if the government thought that it was handling anti-Semitism as resolutely and toughly as before, they're going to have to find a whole new suite of measures to implement. Now is the time not to waste and sit on our hands and draft new legislation. We need action very, very quickly to reinforce the Australian Jewish community and to satisfy our greatest question that we have now, and that is, do Jews have a future in this country?
I think many Jews in the diaspora wonder if Jews have a place in the West. That's not, and I think, of course, the loss to those countries, I don't know about you, I'm sure you feel you're an Australian, and I am British and proudly so. I don't want to leave this country. What steps do you think the Australian government could take to actually put that off so that the Australian community, Jewish community, survives?
No less than 24 hours before this attack, I, as a non-alarmist, as someone who's been a leader in this community for nearly 2 decades, talking casually to Jewish families over a Shabbat table, we've been having these conversations amongst ourselves for a while now, and we never thought it was going to get this bad. Now, when things started to get worse, we all knew that the worst was only around the corner if government didn't step up its actions. But I get asked this question by a lot of the media as to what my expectations is of this federal government. My expectation is this: if there are laws, enforce them. If the laws aren't strong enough, change the laws. If you can't change the laws, redraft new laws. Every government institution and bureaucracy needs to wake up. This is a problem of a very, very small community. This is a problem of historic irrelevance. You do not have to go far into the history books to understand the origins, problems, and the way to kill off the issues of anti-Semitism.